In this video, we're going to discuss some common laboratory glassware, and this is designed to help you when you come to lab for check-in, so you won't have as much confusion identifying the different glassware, because organic glassware is a little bit different from the glassware that you used in GChem. All right, so these should be familiar to you. These are Erlenmeyer flasks here. Erlenmeyer flasks are used to run reactions in, as well as to collect reaction samples. Beakers, obviously you use these in GChem as well. And vacuum flask, the difference in a vacuum flask and an Erlenmeyer flask is the nipple here on the side that distinguishes this flask from an Erlenmeyer. This is used for vacuum filtration, which I'll show you a setup for in a minute. So these are two funnels that you'll use in organic. You've seen the gravity funnels before. These are just used for gravity filtration. You will use these with an Erlenmeyer flask. On this side, this is a Buchner funnel used for vacuum filtration, and you always use these with a vacuum flask. To seal up the flask with the funnel, normally you use a vacuum adapter, which is shown here, or you would use a black rubber stopper with a hole in it that the funnel can fit through. All right, and so here's one filtration setup. Here's a Buchner funnel. You line it with filter paper, and then attach it to a vacuum flask or filter flask. And if you remember, the difference in a vacuum flask and an Erlenmeyer is that the vacuum flask has a nipple on the side that you attach a rubber hose to. All right, and this rubber hose is attached to an aspirator. That's the little piece attached to the faucet with the nipple on the side, and then one piece going down into the sink. This is a typical setup for using a gravity funnel, which is shown here. Right, you would flute your filter paper. If you remember from general chemistry, when you take that filter paper and you fold it over several times to flute it to make it fit into the gravity funnel, that goes here. You place that setup into an Erlenmeyer flask and pour your solution through so that the solid stays in the funnel, and then the liquid passes through. You'll have to use this setup if you ever do a hot gravity filtration, which is done when you are recrystallizing a compound, but you have insoluble impurities in that compound. So we'll talk more about that later. Another type of funnel that you'll see in organic lab is what we call a separatory funnel. We use a separatory funnel to separate mixtures of organic and aqueous solvents, and the separation is based on density. So the lower layer will be the solution or the solvent with the highest density, and then the upper layer would be a solvent that has a lower density than the bottom layer. And what you want your two layers to be immiscible, meaning that they're not soluble in one another. That way you can easily distinguish between the top layer and the bottom layer, and depending on which layer you want to keep, that'll determine how you separate these two layers. If you want to keep the top layer, you would drain off the bottom layer into one beaker or flask, and then bring a clean beaker or flask to drain the top layer into. If you want to keep the bottom layer, you just drain that off into a flask, and then you will bring another beaker or flask to drain the top layer into. Here's some other lab equipment that you may not have used in general chemistry. These are glass rods. They're used for stirring. They're used especially in recrystallization for scratching the side of a beaker or Erlenmeyer flask. Thermometers you've used before. In general chemistry, you use thermometers with alcohol in them. The thermometers in organic have mercury in them, so you have to be extra careful with those. And these are just some test tubes of assorted sizes. Watch glasses, a scupula, which is similar to a spatula, and then the graduated cylinders shown here. And hopefully you remember how to read these. You read it from the meniscus, where the solvent kind of dips down. Where the solvent dips, that's where you read the graduated cylinder to determine what volume of solution or solvent is in there. And this is just some other lab equipment that you'll see: clamps, ring stands, magnetic stirrer, as well as a stir plate, which we'll use quite often in this lab for heating, right? Because these not only have magnetic stirrers in them, but they can also be used as hot plates.